Good morning. Oh, wow. Try that again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here in New York City, day 4 of Cloud Expo, the final day of this Cloudaganza. We have our early morning power panel, which we've decided to call it the wrap-up panel, not in the sense that we're all going home in half an hour's time. On the contrary, lots of content to come. But we're going to look at what has made this week, which I dubbed the beginning of the summer of cloud, different from any other week, or perhaps it's just another week in the cloud. So I'm going to first tell you who we've got to chew on this particular topic, perhaps you could introduce yourself, starting with John.
I'm John Keagy with GoGrid.
Concise. Scott, beat that.
Okay, I'm Scott Morrison. I'm the CTO and Chief Architect of Layer 7 Technologies.
Andrew, this is a very brisk trend here.
Andrew Hillier, CTO and co-founder of CiRBA.
Tim Negris, VP of Marketing at 1010 Data.
Steve.
I'm Steve Sicola. I'm CTO for Xiotech Corporation.
I'm Alex Teu. I'm a VP of Business Development at Oxygen Cloud, the lanyard that you're wearing.
So hands up if you've got an exhibit here at Cloud Expo. So you kind of ought to be able to tell us, has it been any different this week, the people who have been coming to you, than any other Cloud Expo? Starting with randomly Scott.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. I think I've been to, Jeremy, how many Cloud Expos have we had?
Oh, well, if this is 8,
oh, okay.
I guess you've
well, I haven't been to
at
8.
least 9.
But I've been to a lot of them, and by far, this is, we're seeing the most, I think, real customers doing real things in the cloud, which, I mean, sounds kind of trite. People are always going to say that, but it feels like there is a bit of a sea change right now. It feels like all of a sudden people have kind of gone over the issues that, oh, what am I going to do about security? What am I going to do about compliance? Da, 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 da. And they actually need to do something. And they're looking for real solutions. So I think this is the time, more than anything else, that we're actually seeing the cloud becoming very, very real.
Anyone else agree or disagree strongly with that? Steve?
I agree. I mean, the feel here is that, for me anyway, people are interested in really looking for what really is behind the cloud in terms of there is hardware behind the cloud, there is systems there, and how can you be the most efficient there, and asking for a lot of information that before they were just touching on a periphery.
So people want to look under the hood, you think,
Yeah,
much more than before?
They want to know if it's, hamburger in a transmission or something that's real.
Alex?
Yeah, I would have to agree. There aren't so many questions around like what is the cloud and what it does and what is it about. It's really more about what is your solution and how it can solve the problems happening at their business. And it becomes more solution oriented. So there isn't that initial like the hype aspect of it.
Tim, 1010 Data is a newcomer. What are you seeing?
Right, it's the first Cloud Expo for me, but I followed the previous ones, and I guess there's been sort of a transition to reflect a number of other comments from the question being, what is it, to what is it good for? And how do I do that? So most of the people that have been to our booth, have come in talking about what they want to do with cloud computing technology, what applications, what business it serves, and so on.
John?
Well, yesterday I gave a talk, nice audience, and I railed against the so-called on-premises false cloud. And a lot of audiences, when you talk about the false cloud and how people are kidding themselves when they think they can bring the cloud into their own data center, you get a few objectors in the audience, and I didn't find any. Thought that interesting.
Huh, that is interesting. So that's a change.
Yeah.
Well, there's a song, I don't know how old everyone is in the audience, but Frankie Goes to Hollywood, it occurs to me, Tim, had that line, didn't they? War, what is it good for? So what about that? If you're now asked today, this week, cloud, what is it good for? What do you actually say? You would.
What is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
Say it again.
That's
no, it's everything.
So what are you going to say to the average customer? You're going to ask them what they do, right? What their needs are. But life's short. So what if they want a great example? What is it good for, Tim?
Well, I mean, broadly, to get out of the business of managing servers and equipment and so forth, and get back to business. I mean,
what's not to like?
Yeah, I mean, there's parts of the business go into it easier than other parts right now, but I mean, it's hard to imagine a day where it won't be mostly everything.
So, I mean, do we go so far as to say getting IT out of your way? Do you,
No, changing the role of IT. They have a role to play as strategic provisioners of information and to provide governance and look after regulatory compliance. I mean, there's a lot more intelligent things IT could be doing than walking around checking disk drives.
Right. So no one should feel threatened, but there's a change of role.
No, actually, I want to pick up on that because I think that's a really good point. Because in a lot of ways, cloud is the excuse you need to maybe change a bit. We've always been looking at, we want to take IT and make IT do things a little differently. Cloud is a great excuse. It's a great opportunity because all of a sudden you've got this thing that you want to jump on. And it really does require a different approach from IT. And that doesn't mean laying off everybody in IT or reassigning them to something very different. But they do have to rethink their roles and responsibilities and rethink that control boundary. There's stuff you give up. There's stuff you give up to John's company when you work with GoGrid or something like that. But at the same time, you understand where that boundary is, where you can still affect control and that challenges IT, but it challenges them in a good way, I think. So I think the neat thing about cloud is we can use it as an agent for change within our departments. And if we do that, then we're getting something good out of it.
All right. The next question is a very simple metaphorical question, because I know that we've still been seeing the public, private, hybrid, slide after slide after slide. So I want to sort of get by that, because I think we need some more ways of thinking about cloud computing. So let's go the route that if public cloud is, that old good one, if public cloud's a bus, what's private cloud? Is public cloud a bus that anybody can get on? And there's another one along any minute, so it's a commodity. Is that a fruitful metaphor? And what does that make private cloud computing?
Well, and what is hosted private cloud?
I need to know.
Well, for example, there's you asked what's new in the industry, and there's a new Forrester survey out and a new PricewaterhouseCoopers survey. They use different words that I think the industry needs to settle around.
This is what we need to nail.
Okay.
Come on.
Metaphorical. Hosted private cloud, private cloud managed by a service provider is the wording that's used in the PricewaterhouseCoopers survey. Okay. Turns out that amongst enterprise clients, according to these two surveys, the demand for what GoGrid calls hosted private cloud exceeds the demand for hosted public cloud or public cloud. So I think this is a whole new genre other than hybrid, because it's not really on-prem, off-prem straddling that we're talking about. It's public cloud computing, but on private, dedicated hardware.
Right. Now, I happen to agree with this. Do you agree that that's something new that's becoming very big, very fast? Steve, nodding.
I do, although reality speaks that nothing happens overnight.
I think that we're looking for those trends within it all.
It opens up things because everything about cloud is, been doing clusters and large databases and systems for like 30 years. The thing about it is it's now the enablement of automation and the abstraction really leads to people not having to focus on all the gut level things all the time. And having something that's a hosted public cloud or private cloud, that's all fine. Those are things that are possible now, especially with the pipes that are out there and security that's come along.
Andrew, what's CiRBA seeing?
Well, I think these are all necessary progressions. I don't think we see a lot of our larger customers just ready to put everything right outside. And they are comfortable with SO models, outsourcing models, but that's quite a different beast than the cloud. So we see a lot of them starting off internal, and it's not the same as getting out of the business of IT, but it is a baby step towards getting used to the paradigm, because there's some advantage just to using a cloud-like model internally. Self-service is very valuable, and we see IT organizations that don't want to be the intermediary for every capacity request. They don't want to be in the business of procuring hardware all the time, so just getting them out of that cycle is very useful so they can focus on managing things properly and let the users serve themselves. So we see that as a useful progression, and it's also, cloud is a form of standardization. They've all virtualized, and that went through its paces, but there wasn't really a lot of standardization when people virtualized. You kind of take what you had and you build it in the same image in the virtual environment. Cloud forces you to fit into slots and stacks that are more standardized, and that's a big shift for organizations. So that alone is big enough to warrant, that's a whole step unto itself, just to get used to all your apps running that way before you run them somewhere else is kind of the pattern we see, especially in the larger enterprise where they have the economies of scale to do it internally. Right. They can make tens of thousands of VMs run internally, but don't underestimate how hard it is for them to turn and shift towards that model for their lines of business. Any change is very hard to do.
Yeah, true.
I'm going to posit one slight change myself, which I'm noticing more this week than ever before. John kind of brings it up. That's why he sits at my left hand there, my left-hand man. If you ask an infrastructure guy, or actually a storage guy, Steve, you might relate to this as well. What I am noticing for the first time is that you are telling us how IT is being used without an agenda. There you are, you like building the roads, and then you notice traffic patterns, and you go, that's interesting, we could productize this, or we could push this forward. And I'm thinking of an example, for example, somebody was telling me yesterday in one of my interviews that they realized that a lot of people were using storage here, using the cloud for DR, but what they didn't understand was why, once they had put things into the cloud, they turned off the servers. Same way. It was there now. So there are large amounts of servers just turned off by the client. So they realized, well, that's something we should be telling everybody to do. There's huge savings for us all. Get your stuff up there, make sure you've got your entire thing replicated, turn it off. So is that a difference? I've never heard of an IT trend where the user seems to be so much in control, and you've just got to keep driving the volumes.
Well, let's point out that's a public cloud use case.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to turn off, except that you save on the power. You still have to have the equipment to turn off servers that are in your so-called on-premises cloud.
So-called. There's an agenda here.
Yeah, I'm working it.
Well, I would say when you think about me, I think about it in terms of a model where some pieces are on, some pieces are off, and they go on and off automatically based on what kind of demand there is, and that allows you to be the most efficient you can be. Because efficiency is the key for building a cloud. Because if you don't have that efficiency, anybody can build anything anyway, but if you don't build efficiency, you're A, not going to make money if you're the provider, and B, you're not going to save money from doing it the old way.
Now, you're thinking business efficiency. I was going to ask you all, did you hear anybody talk, particularly this week, green, if talking green means anything?
Well, I did. I mean,
you did?
For me, in my presentations, both of them, it was one of those things where people ask questions about, well, there is an ecological aspect to it, because depending on how you do it, you're either going to save power, and, you know, obviously me, I'm all about reliability and things like that. The more reliable things are, the less things you're going to throw away.
Is that a driver?
It's hugely green. Take Salesforce. Which
No, we know it is green. I just wonder whether it's being talked about.
I sure talked about it. Salesforce is doing everything they do with 3,000 servers, half of them turned off. You know, they're serving up complex CRM needs to over 100,000 businesses. You know, how many businesses would how many servers would those businesses have if they had to do CRM themselves? You know, I'm thinking Salesforce has taken more than 1 million servers out of the world.
Right.
More than 1 million physical servers saved. You know, it's an incredibly efficient platform.
Did anyone, I don't know if anyone in the audience has run into the booth out there where New York State is giving just funding. Virtualizer will give you money. Just virtualize this year, and they have a huge budget.
Well, you realize, I mean, people may not know this, but if you go to all the different states, they have different levels of programs for people that actually implement things that save a lot of power.
Yeah.
You get rebates from the power company.
Yeah.
As we did a whole deal in Southern California where the customer ended up getting $5 million back from the power company.
Right.
That money talks when it comes to that kind of stuff.
One thought, we might turn this to the audience in a minute. One thought is, I know that people listen at Cloud Expo and they assume that we've all taken it just for granted that you have to have the cloud somewhere now in your spectrum. But I bet there are a few people wondering, I don't know, do I have to? So I want to literally ask that question. Is there any possibility, we're now in June, is there any possibility that if you're sitting in the audience in June and you don't yet have something in the cloud, that, let's say, at the end of the year, it would still be okay to have nothing in the cloud? Why does it really matter so much? I mean, is there an option just to do nothing today? That's my question. John.
You know, at GoGrid, every now and then I'll have a CIO come to me and say, John, we're thinking of giving your service a try. And I say, well, actually, you have 5 accounts with GoGrid already from 3 different locations. So I think it's not likely there's any companies of any scale that, you know, there's the secretary that puts in the credit card and signs up for Salesforce. And it's just, you can't stop it.
Okay, I like that. Scott?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it has a lot to do with the size of the company. Like if I was a startup, it would be madness not to be out in the cloud. Like to actually be making use of that. Why would I buy equipment It's just, my VCs, my board would be looking at me askance like I was crazy. That said,
so you could do it, but why
wouldn't you? But that said, I mean, it's very different for a larger corporation, which I think is, has been pointed out. There's a sort of a grassroots infiltration that happens all the time, and I think the extent to which that happens is much beyond the understanding and grasp of most of the executive suite. I don't think these guys realize how significant that really is. It happens everywhere in small to medium business and large business right now. So you probably are in the cloud.
Andrew, agree?
Well, I think there's no excuse not to have a cloud strategy. I think there are lots of reasons why you might not have certain things in the cloud.
Okay, that's a good distinction, right? There's no possibility by December of not having a cloud strategy.
Yeah, if you're ignoring it, then you're doing your company a disservice. But we see all kinds of apps, high frequency trading. You're not going to just throw that up in the customer data. They're not ready for it. So I think most organizations will have things in the cloud. But I think the important thing is around the strategy, and we view it as policy. What reminds me of this is the federal government initiative to move things into the cloud. All your agencies move stuff into the cloud. And that can be dangerous if you don't have a policy on what the ground rules are to move things into the cloud or not. If you have all these applications and you say, well, I'm just going to randomly start throwing things in the cloud, that can be dangerous. So we see people kind of stepping back and saying, we need to think through what our policy is for what we do with our data, what we do with our customer data and our type apps, and then we're going to go after them in a way that makes sense with our business, and not just put them in the cloud for the sake of putting it in the cloud. I think that's an important distinction, because if you don't figure that out first, it can be very dangerous.
Absolutely. Tim?
Well, I guess it depends on which cloud you're talking about, this public versus private thing. It would have saved us all a lot of trouble as marketers, writers, thinkers, whatever, if somebody had used a different term for one of them. That is to say, virtualization in the data center, sometimes referred to as private cloud, versus a public utility of services where applications are on demand, storage is in another place, and it might be private hosted, it might be public like Amazon, but nonetheless, those are two different things. I think in either case, probably either will be touching most businesses in some way if it's not already, but those are two different things. In the case of going green, in the case of a variety of different kinds of things, doing it in-house, as it were, private cloud, is a good thing. You're not going to do AutoCAD rendering over the web. You're not going to do a variety of different types of applications on anything but servers that are high-speed connected to endpoint devices. But then there's the other cloud, right? The cloud that gets advertised about on TV, the cloud that people put their pictures in and is a common notion. I mean, it's a retail notion at this point. Right. So virtually all individuals are already using the cloud. Businesses, some are fighting it, some are finding very careful strategic uses for it, and some of them are all in, but just it depends on which cloud you're talking about as to where it'll be touching you.
Yeah, good points. Stephen?
Well, it's interesting. I look at this and I think about 10 years ago, there was a company called Storage Networks. They were the first guys that did a cloud. It was before people called it a cloud, and also KPMG were doing the same thing. And the interesting part with how this goes is how people perceive things and how they may accept it or not. Storage networks failed mainly because they couldn't basically have people trust that they were able to cut up the storage and the servers properly to be able to make money. 10 years goes by, the opportunity is actually there. And now it's still back to whether people actually trust it or not, and these are based on all the decisions people are going to make to say private or public, and I think that's going to be the key as we go forward.
Right. Alex?
Yeah, I think if you're a CIO of a company, I think you're compelled to look at cloud because it's such a buzzword and everyone else is kind of looking at it, and you should certainly look at it for possibly for cost savings and efficiency. And at the end of the day, you do the checkbox thing, and you can stand still. But where it really comes into play, where real changes are made, when you start looking at problems that are happening around your company, if you have users who are now leaving the network, how do problems around that get addressed? They're using iPad or iPhone mobile devices. How do you address that? Traditional file storage are not going to address that. So I think the cloud offers real solutions, real benefits, and real goodness that only the cloud can solve really well and efficiently. And I think that's where a company CIO can really look to the cloud and go, I need to look at that because of a problem that I actually have. The initial check into the cloud, everyone's like, oh, see if it could save me money or efficiency. And it's kind of a superficial review, but it's when they have a real problem and the cloud can solve it in an innovative and a unique way. That's when real change happens.
That makes sense to me. Next question is a free-for-all. Tim mentioned the government. I'm not saying that's going to be what you answer this question, but I want to know an organization or a company or a thought leader, not yourselves, who you feel, and not defer to, but who you thank daily for helping drive all this. So you wake up in the morning, you say, I am in such a sweet spot because of this other development that's helping my business. So who are you grateful to every morning? Steve?
The internet.
The internet.
It's what enabled all this. It's what enabled all this.
That's a totally valid
I mean, all the methods that are out there on how the
Very
web
good.
works and how machine-to-machine interaction happens, that didn't exist 10 years ago.
So you wake
like
up
now
every
it
morning
does.
and you
It
thank
is.
the
That's.
net.
It is.
I
Yeah,
like
thank you.
John.
Thank you, Al Gore.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Al. John,
I'm thankful to Amazon. You know,
this is the sort of thing I was thinking of.
we compete with Amazon, and but, you know, we came out with our service in 2006, and if Amazon hadn't come along, it might have been like a tree falling in the forest.
Yeah.
But instead, the industry's got a lot of credibility, and thank you, Amazon.
Anyone from Amazon in the audience? How to speak from Amazon? Okay, so publicly we're thanking Amazon. Anyone else?
I actually probably would thank VMware. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, God, not those guys. But the truth is, you know, more than anybody else, they probably popularized.
God, what about those
sorry,
guys? Jeez.
they popularized the notion of virtualization and made it mainstream. And I think that's important because all of a sudden people have they're starting to understand
Overrated.
what it means to have multiple instances of data running.
John doesn't do well with credit where credit's due.
Virtualization's overrated. You know, that's why they
Yeah, but that's not
they changed the
VMware's
the names of the trade show from virtualization to cloud. You know, it's old news.
Well, no, but I think, look, cloud is a layer on top of virtualization in a lot of ways.
It has nothing to do with virtualization.
No,
Okay, gentlemen. Okay, gentlemen. Tim,
let's
are you
take over the
grateful-
power panel. This
are
is
you
a
grateful
great
to everyone on the
discussion.
call? Are you grateful?
I'm grateful for Gordon Moore for having that great law that still remains true. Is cloud computing and virtualization both are just examples of the many ways in which smart people keep finding to make that keep coming true, that every 18 months or so things are twice as good as they were before, and so that's why I'm
Slight
grateful.
paraphrase of Moore's law, twice as good as before, but we'll go with it. I like it. It's
There you
very
go.
optimistic.
That's right.
Andrew.
Well, I agree with many of the names that were named. You know, VMware did, of course, make virtualization mainstream, and we see that as an enabler of what we would call placement, where you can now put things in different places, although in VMware it's on different machines. And the cloud is the business of placement at a much higher level. So it kind of fostered the comfort level to move up to the next level. But I think if I had to thank anyone, it's the early adopters. There's all these technologies, and we talk a lot of vision, and you can talk for years, but it's when people start using it. So we see, you know, large banks, financial services being very early in on some of these technologies and using them in scale, which is really good for everybody. So, you know, I think all these technologies that come out are large telco customers as well. You know, they're building clouds that they're providing to their customers. So it's not talk, they're actually having to do it, and they have to figure it out, and they're the ones that really make it, you know, work. You can have all these disjoint technologies. You walk around the floor out here, and it reminds me of, you know, virtualization several years ago, where if I were a customer trying to figure it out, it'd be very, very hard. You now have a real problem, you're trying to solve it, and there's 100 vendors, and you have to figure out what they all do, and, you know, everybody's throwing something at you. And that's where this industry is right now, where it's real problems being solved. People are pushing through and doing it, but you have to figure it out. And it's those early adopters that are actually piecing it together and saying, now we've got a working solution. We had to buy 5 products, but we're there. And that's just good for everybody, because that makes it into a real solution.
You forgot to say, thank goodness they can come to Cloud Expo. And, you know, all 100 vendors are in one place.
Yes, thank goodness.
You were coming
they're all,
to.
yes, I was coming to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
goodness
and
there's
we're all-
one event that we can all get together and,
You're in the
and talk
basement.
about this.
I love it. Alex, do you stand on the shoulder of giants at Oxygen, or are you
I
just
do.
pioneers?
I'm very thankful to Steve Jobs, not only for single-handedly holding up California economy, but also I think he's really brought the idea of consumerization of IT into something very real. Whereas in the past, I think that if end users were bringing in devices or applications, IT was in a very rightful place to deny that service and support. But now with things like the iPad revolution and enterprise rolling out initiatives specifically to support iPad, the whole reason is because now the people who are bringing that device into the enterprise are the executives themselves, and now IT no longer has that leverage to deny that kind of support. So I think with everything he's doing, just recently announcing iCloud, it's problems are being created from how users are interacting with data. And so now cloud, with all its inherent benefits and solutions, are positioned to solve those problems. Right. And so I think that Stephen Jobs has helped the cloud industry significantly.
Now we have an Intel presentation itching to get going, but we're not going to let them have the stage before asking the obvious question. Cloud Expo is here in the basement of the Javits, sort of fog expo. We'll be upstairs next year at the very least, up there in the sunshine. But what about Cloud Expo, that cloud part, John? How many more years is it going to be useful to call it Cloud Expo?
You know, that's why I found it interesting, Alex, thanks Steve Jobs. You know, I think we can thank Steve Jobs for naming this new product iCloud, because it pretty much assures us that that stupid buzzword's going to be around.
So that might give us some extra
for a long time. But you know, as long as people are going to be claiming that on-premises VMware installations are cloud computing, I think we're misusing the term.
Yeah, so, but the genie is out of the bottle.
Right on.
I think it's going to be cloud all the way. Scott, I think I've got 7 years. What do you think?
7 years. Well, look, I've got 2 kids. My daughter's 8, my son is 5. And my prediction is as they grow up, they won't see clouds. They're just going to see air. And what I mean by that is this moniker will go away, and it will just be the way we do computing. And I actually believe that style of doing computing that supports automation and self-service and mass use of commodity hardware and equipment and things like that, these characteristics can exist anywhere, and it'll just be the way we do computing. We won't think about it anymore. It won't be something special. I think we'll probably see...
This is not good.
No. I think, look, it's a logical evolution.
No, this is not good.
Well, it's not good if you're selling conferences. Okay?
This is not good at all. Like, I am the motor car man who's doing Motor Expo.
So it's going to be like Air Expo. Yeah. But, well, no, the thing is, it will go through different monikers and things like that. And here's my prediction, actually. Within a couple of years, this is going to be Mobile and Cloud Expo. Because I think,
actually, that's very good.
I think what we're going to see, and what we are seeing, is the perfect storm between what's happening, by Mr. Jobs and his friends in Cupertino and what's happening in cloud, starting to come together and create this just unbelievable synergism. When I look at my my pipeline in that, a good 25 to 30% of this is being driven by mobile applications right now. And I'm in the API management business. So these are basically customers coming to me because all of a sudden they want to take their APIs and services and push them out to an iPad or push them out to an iPhone or something like that. And cloud is a major part of that, of course, because they want to have data, they want to have applications hosted in the cloud. So I think that convergence is something that we can't ignore, and we're going to see a lot of it.
Scott's thrown the show a lifeline. Anyone else? Because time is running out.
I think you have to look at the splintering of this into several. I mean, you made a good point that the nomenclature is all over the board. And one difference this year, I think, from previous years is that in every previous year, every presentation you go into, somebody would spend 5 or 10 minutes explaining what they mean by cloud. Right? It's the front end of every slide deck had that, and this year is much less. People can understand what we're talking about, and you can kind of make assumptions.
November, it's banned totally.
You can ban those. But I think we see a difference in the consumer space versus the SMB space versus the enterprise space, and they might evolve into 3 very different uses of that technology. So I think you might end up having your SUV versus small car compact. You might have 3 conferences.
I love this. Yeah. He comes again. Tim.
I think that's a very astute observation. I think that the consumer cloud is becoming a part of just communication. People think of Facebook as a method of communicating with people, and storage. They put stuff in their Dropbox and so forth, and so essentially making the personal computer really go away, where all you have effectively is a user interface with the cloud. I mean, I've been carrying around an iPad for a couple of months now, 3G connected, and I had to bring my laptop today to do a presentation.
Hands up if you're carrying around a 3G iPad connected to the cloud. It's not mine, is it?
We're giving one away to our
I
booth.
can vouch for the popularity of it because I left mine for 30 seconds.
Right.
And
So it's
someone
a
else
three.
is enjoying the benefit of it. I hope you're really getting good use out of it. Sorry.
And then,
Personal note.
at an enterprise level, it has a totally different meaning, and it's more akin to what we see here, where people are trying to solve real problems with how they're going to efficiently store lots of data and connect lots of users securely to lots of applications and so forth. So I think the idea that there are multiple things that it will morph into is very very wise.
Morph Expo. Steve.
After multiple permutations from mainframe to hosted things to grid to now cloud, I think cloud actually got the part where marketing can take advantage of this in multiple ways with many morphs, even the way you did your logo here. It's here to stay. You finally got to something where it's gonna have lifetime on this one. So
Alex, there are discounts to be had if you say things this positive.
I think if you own the trademark to cloud, it may not be that valuable in a few years. I think we're going to move to a point where all users and machines and data are all interconnected. And the whole concept of cloud to sort of control all that is going to be more important than ever. And so I think it's here to stay, but it may be a different form factor. I think someone mentioned about how it's all just going to go into the air, so maybe we'll call it Mist Expo. But it'll just be a different form.
Drizzle,
or rainbow, yeah.
Drizzle.
Or drizzle, yeah.
We'll have it in Seattle.
Just not vapor.
Okay,
just not
we have to
vapor
drop
expo.
this theme right now before it gets very ugly. I can say for people in the audience who might not know this, you might not know this on the panel, they're not here, but the domain name cloud.com was bought and sold at a Cloud Expo. The owners of it came to us and they said, so we have this cloud.com domain, it was just like in our pocket, and we realized that this could be worth some bucks. May we come and auction it at a Cloud Expo? We said, of course, that's a great story, that's a great... And of course, the owners of that trademark are now here exhibiting. So I bet there are some more domain names in the light of this conversation that are suddenly going to pop up. And maybe we'll auction them in November at Cloud Expo Silicon Valley. We're out of time here. It's Intel next. Let us thank, in the time-honored fashion, John Keagy, CEO of GoGrid, Scott Morrison, CTO of Layer 7. You can clap, it's okay. Andrew Hillier, CiRBA, Tim Negris, 1010 Data, Stephen Sicola of Xiotech, and Alex Teu of Oxygen Cloud. Thank you, audience, for being up so early. Thank you out there for watching this on the World Wide Web. But most of all, thank you, gentlemen. You are now dismissed.
Thank you. Hazardous waste.